call tonight's City Council workshop to order. And Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Husnick. Councilmember Valento.
Here.
Councilmember Erickson.
Here.
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
And Mayor Bain.
Here, I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, so just a reminder for everyone that's in the room, we are in workshop format tonight. And we do have open forum on our agenda. If you would wish to speak and address council, you're welcome to do so. In our workshop format, we are going to be in a more relaxed environment than what you would typically see in a council meeting. It's a working session between council and staff to talk about whatever topics are on the agenda. Anything that requires official action tonight will come before council at a future meeting for official action. So again, just to set the stage that this is indeed just truly a working session and no official action or votes will be taken this evening. With that, we do have open forum. Is there anybody signed up for open forum, Karen?
I have 2 people signed up on open forum, so I wanted to give anybody else a chance, if you did want to talk, to come and sign up right now, if you were interested in doing that.
And also, as always, you're welcome to be here and observe as well. All right, for open forum, we have Doug Ramseth.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Doug Ramseth. I live at 21220 Fondant Avenue North in Forest Lake. I'm here tonight to speak about the reconstruction of Eureka Avenue. Tonight on the way over here, there were 24 cars parked on the shoulder between the roadbed and the lake fishing. There were children playing. There were cars with wheels on the highway. It's a dangerous situation. The road needs to be reconstructed. The people who are fishing and the cars that are parked there, the foot traffic has caused erosion of the shore bank, and it's in the wintertime, cars drive down off the road onto the lake, further eroding the shoreline. In 2020, the Washington Conservation District did an analysis of the erosion problem and the safety issue. They published their findings, which I've previously provided to the council in the past. They cited the safety issues, and it's a tragedy waiting to happen because there are children that are fishing with their families and the cars are parked tightly there. The road itself is, well, if you don't know where Eureka is, it runs between Highway 97 and 11th Avenue. It's situated between the Clear Lake, the west shore of Clear Lake, and the freeway. It has been in terrible shape for years. It is getting worse. It is causing more erosion. It's a safety issue. When Highway 97 is going to be rebuilt in a few years, that will push more traffic onto Eureka Avenue. Eureka Avenue now has semis using it that had never used it before. They found it as a shortcut. So it's being used by traffic more and by traffic that shouldn't be on a road of that nature. We suggest that this is the opportune time to reconstruct it while we have that window before Highway 97 is disrupted and driving more traffic onto Highway 90, onto Eureka Avenue. So we ask that the council consider putting this on the road construction plans for 2023. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Doug. Also for open forum, Mike Lemire.
Yes, I came to speak on the same topic, and I was pretty much echo exactly what he said, so,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Anyone else that would like to speak either on this topic or any other topic as part of open forum? And again, we have open forum at the beginning of every meeting, and so if you want to provide feedback in the future, you're always welcome to do so. On this exact topic, you know, we do have a couple of road projects on the agenda for this evening. The street paving updates will be more general in nature and more financial in nature of what is the financial model to support our street projects and less about individual projects themselves. However, if you are staying for that portion of the meeting, and I would hope that you do, I think it'll kind of illustrate just the overall financial situation with our streets and how we as council and staff are looking to solve that. I'm not sure you're going to get specific answers as to a timeline on a particular project, but hopefully broader awareness as we are also learning what the overall impact would be of projects and ultimately how are we funding those projects. And so that's all part of the planned agenda this evening. So we appreciate you're here and we appreciate your interest.
Yeah,
Patrick,
just
you look like
a
you have
reminder to
something to
council and to the audience. The city submitted 3 projects to the state legislature for bonding. Eureka Avenue was the #1 project that we asked for and is the #1 priority. So hopefully, if we can get some money from the state to do that, that's what will come forward. We should know by the summer. If not, when we get to the rest of the street plan, you'll see some of that, where Eureka stands on that list as well.
To that exact point, I believe those bonding projects, there have been bills introduced in the legislature for each of
Yes,
those. Is that the case?
The bills have been introduced in the legislature for the House and the Senate for Eureka Avenue and the other 2 projects. They're in a competition with all the other projects from the state. We have visited with both our state House members and our state Senate member to try to get them to push those up to the top of the list. So again, bonding bill's a long process. It's a political process. Hopefully by when they adjourn in May, they will have made a decision on the bonding bill.
Very good. Thank you, Patrick. All right, with that, we'll close open forum and bring conversation back to council. Let's move on to our next agenda item, which is consideration of County State Aid Highway 33 Everton Avenue project. And I believe we're getting an update with Washington County this evening. And Ryan, do you want to maybe kick us off?
Sure. Mayor, City Council, tonight we have Washington County here joining us to talk about the County State Aid Highway 33 Everton Avenue project as planned for 2024 construction. First of all, Commissioner Fran Miron will start off with the introduction of the project and talk about some other things that we're working on together. And then another Ryan from Washington County, who was the lead project manager, will go through the cooperative agreements, a PowerPoint with you guys, and then believe you guys might also have some layouts up in front of you too. So with that, I'll kick it off to Commissioner Fran Miron.
Mayor,
Welcome, Commissioner.
council members, good to be before you tonight. We've had a lot of discussion about this particular project with a lot of public input up until now, and I know Ryan is here tonight to present the project, but I think this is a fitting place to start in a workshop setting. I don't believe we've been before this council with council members Roberts or Erickson, on this particular project. So you might have been brought up to speed a little bit by your staff, but certainly we haven't had that opportunity. And I think Ryan will have some additional numbers, I think a little more detail to look at on some of the cost share. But as I said, I'm excited to be here. When we first started talking about this project, we informed the council that we haven't been up here for a long time. Broadway was the last big project that we did up in the Forest Lake area. And ironically, we're already talking about reconstruction of Broadway Avenue. So it doesn't seem like long enough, but I know based on traffic counts and that type of thing, it is on schedule. So, and we've got a number of other projects that we appreciate the partnership that we have with the city. CASA 32 or 11th Avenue is a project we've had a couple of open houses on and have had some discussion. And then as you're well aware, our discussion with you on a new environmental center here up in the Forest Lake area to serve the northern part of the county. So we've got a number of projects coming up. We appreciate the partnership, and I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to maybe lead this discussion off, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions or concerns that you might have with this project.
Terrific.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for being here. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Commissioner Miron. I'm just going to fire this up real quick. Looks like it's working. So I've just got a quick presentation tonight to go over the CSAH 33 improvement project. As Commissioner Miron said, it's been a while since we've been here, so that's kind of the purpose of tonight, is to get everyone up to speed as we kind of move forward the home stretch. So, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. My name is Ryan Haves, and I'm the project manager of Washington County. I'm here tonight, as I said, to give an update on the CSAH County State Aid Highway 33, which is also known as Everton Avenue Pedestrian and Safety Improvement Project in the city of Forest Lake. So it's been about 18 months since we were last here. So tonight I'm going to go over a project overview, run through the public engagement efforts to date, review the project details, touch on the proposed construction staging. We'll also review the right-of-way process, review project costs, and lastly we'll provide a schedule update. So Everton Avenue became a county state aid highway in 2013 through a jurisdictional transfer with the city of Forest Lake, in which the city assumed ownership of the North Shore Trail and 11th Avenue east of Trunk Highway 61. The existing roadway is largely a two-lane road with failing pavement and a mix of urban and rural roadway sections. The existing corridor experiences operational and safety issues and lacks any pedestrian facilities while serving pedestrians, buses, trucks, and commuter traffic. This is a narrow corridor with wetlands on both the east and west side of the roadway. So the project management team is made up of 4 agencies, including the City of Forest Lake, Washington County, Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, and the Rice Creek Watershed District. Alliant Engineering is our project consultant working on the roadway design. So the project began in 2020, and we held the first open house in July of that year. The purpose of that public engagement piece was to introduce the project and gather feedback from the public of existing issues and potential opportunities along the corridor. A second online engagement was held in March of 2021, where several alternatives were brought forward for public comment. These alternatives included 2 roadway alignment options, 2 pedestrian trail alignment options that connected CSAH 33 with 19th Street along the south side of Broadway Avenue, as well as some pedestrian crossing alternatives for the CSAH 33 crossing. In the fall of 2021, Washington County staff walked the corridor, and we met with 11 different property owners adjacent to the corridor to review the project elements as they related to their site. In October of 2021, Washington County staff brought a resolution of support forward for City Council approval. And then in October of 2022, we began our right-of-way process with a mailer that was sent out to adjacent properties to notify them that an appraiser will be working along the corridor. And these appraisals were received in January of 2023. There have been ongoing property owner meetings through the project development as details are worked through, and a third open house will be planned to review project details and review anticipated construction impacts. So what did we learn from the public engagement efforts? There's a desire for pedestrian facilities along the corridor. There's a need for reconstruction efforts to improve roadway conditions. There's an abundance of commercial access along the corridor and lack of turn lanes creating issues getting onto and off of CSAH 33. And users experience poor traffic operations at the Broadway Avenue intersection, and they also expressed concerns about operational issues at the 19th Street intersection. So from the public engagement efforts, the project management team created the following community-driven project goals: improve traffic operations and safety along the corridor, utilize access management guidelines to improve corridor operations, investigate opportunities for stormwater improvements, and evaluate opportunities for pedestrian facilities. And also maintain long-term transportation goals of Washington County and the City of Forest Lake. So based on the public engagement efforts, technical analysis, and project goals, this project proposes to reconstruct CSAH 33 from 11th Avenue Southwest north to Broadway Avenue, which is shown with a solid green line. Pavement rehabilitation is planned for Broadway Avenue from the west county line, which is Lyons Street, to 19th Street, and that is identified as the green dash line in this map. And so to dig a little deeper, the reconstruction of CASA 33 includes expanding the roadway to include 6-foot shoulders, 11-foot lanes, and a 12-foot center left turn lane from 19th Street north to Broadway Avenue. Improvements at the intersection of CASA 33 and 19th Street include lengthening the existing left turn lanes and adding new right turn lanes for both northbound and southbound traffic. The project also includes a new trail facility along one side of CASA 33, which will connect to the existing 11th Avenue Bridge on the south end of the project and run north to connect to the Broadway Avenue intersection. The trail will follow the east side of CASA 33 to just south of the 19th Street intersection, where a new mid-block crossing will be constructed that includes a center refuge island and appropriate lighting. This location was chosen to relocate the pedestrian crossing away from the uncontrolled intersection at 19th Street and avoid additional conflicts with turning vehicles. The trail will then run along the west side of CASA 33 north to Broadway Avenue. And as mentioned before, a second new trail is proposed to run along the south side of Broadway to connect CASA 33 and 19th Street. Other improvements include shifting the Menards access south to align with the existing commercial access. This will free up the Broadway Avenue intersection and allow longer turn lanes and less conflict at the intersection. The city is proposing to install corridor lighting that carries the theme of Broadway Avenue along CASA 33 with this project. Stormwater improvements include new storm sewer and the installation of 3 additional stormwater ponds along the corridor. And then, as I said before, a mill and overlay along Broadway Avenue from the county line to 19th Street. So construction for this project is planned for 2024. The existing corridor is not wide enough to support both traffic and construction activities. However, this is a unique corridor for the fact that many properties have alternative access off of 19th Street or Broadway Avenue. The proposed construction includes 5 phases, with each phase proposed to be close to traffic while construction takes place. Alternative routes and detours would be identified. During these phases, coordination with property owners will be critical to the success of the project to ensure that operations for businesses can continue through construction. The phases were determined to reduce access disruptions and detours. And discussions are ongoing with property owners as we work through the details of the staging plan. So the county right-of-way process is to hire an independent appraisal firm to assemble property appraisals for county project impacts. The right-of-way process was initiated in October of 2022, and we have received the final appraisals for the impacted properties. A total of 11 property acquisitions are anticipated, ranging from temporary easements to permanent right-of-way. These property negotiations will continue through the summer, and we're hoping to have all acquisitions completed by November of this year. So as we get into project costs, the project costs for this project will follow Washington County's cost participation policy. With that policy, Washington County will cover core roadway elements such as roadway grading, pavement, signing and striping, and storm sewer. The county will also participate in eligible state aid items such as landscaping, amenities, and lighting, up to 3% of the county construction costs. Local agencies participate in engineering, curb and gutter, trail, traffic signals, and retaining walls where applicable. Local agencies are responsible for all utility improvements and additional improvements within the city right-of-way. So here we get to the costs. At a previous workshop about 18 months ago, Washington County staff presented anticipated construction costs for the project. With the project progressing, I'm now able to share a more detailed cost share estimate. This estimate includes engineering, roadway construction, city-directed improvements, and right-of-way acquisitions. So the total costs for this project are estimated at $7.5 million. This includes engineering, right-of-way, and project construction. The county cost share is roughly $5.8 million, and the city share is approximately $1.7. The city share in this table includes utility design and construction, some pond cleaning effort, design and construction, as well as the roadway construction and right-of-way. The city participation is just around 6% as it relates to the county roadway projects improvements. So that brings us to the cooperative agreements. The project costs will be memorialized and agreed to by both parties via cooperative cost agreement. This agreement will lay out cost responsibilities for both the county and the city. We'll also have a maintenance and ownership part of project elements that will be memorialized in a cooperative maintenance agreement. This agreement will lay out ownership and maintenance and responsibilities for existing and newly constructed elements of the roadway. Both of these agreements will be brought back for city council approval after 100% plans and specifications are completed. So a quick schedule update. As I mentioned, this project began in 2020 around the home stretch of preparing plans and specifications. We're looking to acquire necessary right-of-way and obtain project permitting. The project team is working towards bidding this project this fall, with construction set to begin in the spring of 2024. We anticipate this project to be completed within the 2024 construction season, though we may see crews around in 2025 to wrap up project punch list items. So as I mentioned, we're on the home stretch and are working towards 90% plans here at the end of April, and looking to continue the momentum with final plans and specifications by the end of August of 2023. The cooperative agreements will be finalized with 100% estimates and be brought back to City Council for approval and execution of those agreements. With the development of 100% plans, we will look to host a third open house and review the project and anticipated construction impacts with the community. As mentioned, project bidding will occur this fall with construction kicking off here in 2024. That is all I prepared for my presentation tonight. I'll now welcome any questions and feedbacks. I placed some draft agreements on your desks for your review. I know that doesn't give you a whole lot of time, but yeah, so I'll stand for any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. Council, let's just open it up. Questions that you may have? Ryan, forgive me if this is stuff that's been covered on, actually, we'll just do a blanket request for forgiveness if we covered this in previous sessions. Or also, we always can use some help on what's movable at a point in project and what's not movable. Can you walk us through the design considerations of having the trail move from one side of Everton to the other? And I think that's going to be an area of community feedback and questions, and just want us to all be solid on why that was required. In particular, what concerns me is we've got that, I think that trail's crossing right at the Menards intersection, which, and correct me if I'm wrong.
So the trail crosses south of 19th Street.
Can we pull up a map, maybe to? So the trail would be on the west side until you get,
Correct. So the trail's on the east side of the corridor from basically 11th Avenue Southwest to just south of the intersection. It's just south of where the turn lanes develop for 19th Street. And then you'll cross the road and then be on the west side going north.
and it crosses before 19th Street. Is that what you?
That is
Or
correct.
when I say
Sorry, I gotta
before,
figure
to
out-
the south of 19th Street?
This is difficult. So this, I can't really zoom in over here. So yeah, we crossed south of 19th Street, and this is kind of cut off in this picture. And the reasoning for that, crossing at 19th Street, it's an uncontrolled intersection. It's currently got a left lane, or left turn lane and a through lane, adding a right turn lane. So we're shifting it away from the extra turning vehicles, and 19th it's not stop controlled along the county roadway. So we're pulling it away from all the conflicting turning movements. You could get someone slowing down in the left turn lane. The pedestrian might think they're slowing down for them, but the through traffic is not slowing down.
Understood.
And so that's the reasoning where we put it where we did.
And why was the trail not able to be on the same side the whole stretch? I guess that's maybe more the nature of my question.
Yeah, so I'd welcome Steve up here. I stepped into this project after Morgan, and so he's got more of the
Understand.
history. Steve, if you want to.
And I appreciate not having the pedestrian intersection at that uncontrolled intersection, so I guess I just want to make sure foundationally why the trail isn't able to be all on the same side of the street.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Council, thanks for having us. Yeah, basically, we looked at both sides. A big part of it is picking up the residential, which is over on the west side, and getting those people onto the facility. And then there's a lot of commercial accesses on the east side, so keeping those crossings out of there. The west side's a lot freer and clearer for, picking up those pedestrians, putting in the lighting system.
Right.
And kind of making it a nice walkway along the wetlands there. So a lot of that went into it. We did not want to cross traffic over at 220th either, with the intersection there, how wide it is. So crossing them mid-block like that to get them over. There are some wetland impacts on the south side by that storage facility that would have come into play if we put the trail on that side down there. So that was another part of the consideration.
Yep. And it's always a trade-off. So we will have that trail crossing will be at that Menards intersection, right? Like that is.
Along, yes, along.
Is there anything you're able to do from a safety standpoint? I know if it's crossing a street, there's things that are part of that built in. This is a access to a business, so do we still build in the same design criteria as if it were an intersection crossing, or just, intersection can be bananas, and that's just what I'm trying to.
We will
make
have
sure it's safe.
pedestrian ramps. It won't be like just a driveway, typical driveway crossing. It will be treated more like a street crossing with the pedestrian ramps
Okay.
being added in. Which we wouldn't do that on a regular commercial driveway. It'd just be a kind of a trail going through it, so.
Is it striped like you would for a pedestrian crossing?
We wouldn't put in, the county wouldn't typically put in the crossbar striping on a commercial driveway like that. And actually, on the, correct me if I'm wrong, but 19th Street, that would be kind of a city request too, to put in the pedestrian crossing there. Is that right, Ryan?
Correct.
Yeah. For like future maintenance of that, that facility.
Is it possible to, is it possible to add some sort of striping or some sort of visual element, even though it is a, it's, I'm not sure at what point the project becomes private to public, but
Mayor, City Council, there's, if there's concerns there, there's things that we can look at, right? But on the west side where the trail's located is primarily all residential. Whether it's apartments or single-family homes, and those are the users that are gonna be using it consistently. When you do get to Menards, you got to cross that new designed intersection.
Right.
If the trail was on the other side, it would be more dangerous because of the slopes coming into the trail that are coming from the Keys Restaurant, Taco John's, and the pet store, and all those other restaurants in there. So there's probably actually more traffic coming out of that driveway than there is the Menards. With the improvements that they're making with the Menards driveway, it'll be in, much more defined curb and gutter through that area, defined, this is where you need to stop as a user of the trail to look. It's still the responsibility of the trail users to make that eye contact, and, not often that happens, but, same with the drivers coming in and out. Now they're able to have an extended turn lane in there, so you're not gonna be such a rush to hurry and make a quick turn as a driver. You got more queuing, more space, more time to make some decisions than you would have before.
yes.
So overall, the feedback that the project received from the public outreach and from the PMT meetings and city staff, that's kind of how we aligned with the trail location it is. And the mid-block crossing to the south makes much more sense because the width of the crossing, if it's somebody pushing a stroller, is reduced over half. Now you got the safety island. Otherwise, you're gonna have to push across a turn lane, a through lane, and another turn lane, right? That's just a long distance. And if somebody doesn't properly use a blinker, there's a lot of confusion that's created at the intersection. So, we've have that mid-block crossing, that's gonna be a lighted intersection. So at nights, if people are using this trail too, there was specific lights there, so you, as a driver, you'd be able to see that, because right now you drive out through that corridor, right, in that specific area, it's dark as can be. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
That helped. Thank you. Council, other questions? Councilmember Roberts?
Yeah, a couple questions. On this 19th and in the intersection here, that was uncontrolled. Was that ever looked at as a controlled? Was there, just traffic studies don't warrant some kind of controlled entrance there or intersection?
Yeah, that's correct. We did a full traffic analysis with the project, and it wouldn't meet control, warrants for a signal system, if that's the question. We did look at, potentially all-way stop controls and other controls as well, but the two-way stop is what is warranted for the traffic volumes on this roadway.
And is that for future 10 years out or just current use?
That's a 20, yeah, we do future projections for traffic, and that would be future years. Yeah.
Okay. Then the other question to the north of this, that new relocated Menards intersection, is that a cost shared? Who pays for that, or who's paying for that relocation of that?
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council, so we're currently still discussing and in negotiations with Menards. We actually have some meetings this week to discuss, who's paying for what. It is a private access, and Menards has expressed willingness to work with us to accommodate that. So there'll be more to come on that as we get further down the road.
Thanks.
Been waiting for these appraisals to come through to kind of finalize those discussions, so.
Excellent.
And just make you more comfortable about their conversation, the representative they were working with from Menards at the beginning no longer works there, so they've been working with a newer representative. So that's why where we're at right now, their conversations and waiting on some of the other things that need to be done.
Can we walk through, or could you highlight the changes, if any, that to the current design of at the Broadway Avenue intersection. Is that essentially the footprint, safety features essentially replacing what's there today? Or is there anything in particular that's changing? I know the movement of the Menards driveway automatically changes the nature of that intersection, but also just wanted to make sure we understood just what else is changing from today.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So we're also including pedestrian push buttons out here for obviously the pedestrian crosswalks. We're actually including another crossing to the, I guess, the north side of Broadway Avenue. And, you know, with that, those are really the only signal improvements we have planned for this project, but the county is looking at putting out flashing yellow arrows, upgrades on the 3 signals along here in the future.
Okay.
But otherwise, the big key here is, yeah, shifting that Menards driveway back just allows it's about 200 more feet of space for intersection use.
Because I might be getting my project mixed up, but did we have a conversation at one point about potentially changing the angle of where Everton's coming into Broadway to improve the site angles? And was that maybe early consideration? Ryan's shaking his head.
It
maybe
was part of the Menards site redevelopment plan that went through Planning Commission. There was talking about that north, farther down the road, where Everton, you know, comes out of Cub, and then having a drive-through right through Menards at that point, somewhere in there, but that's the alignment that didn't work. That was the skewed offset.
Yes.
That we couldn't get that to come straight in to be a traditional intersection. But at this intersection at Broadway, right now you got just a single ped ramp all by itself on that southwest corner.
Right.
So you can see we're reconstructing the ped refuge area with a ADA compliant pedestrian ped ramp. You have a ADA compliant ped crossing now across Everton, plus the push buttons on the new revised signal stuff. And then the trail connection down the whole south side or west side of Everton, but then also the trail extension that stops at 19th right now to continue that loop where you can actually now take that trail all the way down the south side of Broadway, cross over I-35, and then take the trail all the way to the regional Hardwood Creek Trail now. So significant
Yeah.
improvements with pedestrian facilities. Looks like it's a 2x4 ped ramp that's just randomly surrounded by grass. Now you got it all connectivity with proper ramps for ADA and push buttons for people that need the time to cross the intersection too, with the countdown timers.
Thank you for that. Council, other questions or points of feedback? While we're seeing if there's any additional questions, maybe good opportunities to just realign again on next steps related to this project. Your presentation had a great slide that had those kind of, that anticipated immediate timeline. Do you mind pulling that back up just
Yeah.
again? Actually, it's your last slide, maybe slide 18. Just wanted to make sure. So next official council action, looks like it would be October with the cooperative agreements, is that right?
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council. So the goal would be to get 100% plans, 100% estimates, make sure we're accounting for all project elements. Then we'll bring those final estimates back. You know, we're looking at final plans end of August, so sometime September, October timeframe is when we'd likely be back with those formal agreements.
Excellent. And prior to that, there will be another round of open house, it sounds like, right? Which is a good opportunity to final review, presentation to community, right?
Yep, so that'll really be focused on, you know, construction impacts. You know, the staging will, you'll be showcasing the staging, how things are gonna go, anticipation of, you know, detours, show the detour routes, kind of go over all that information.
Excellent. Just connecting the dots here on some other conversations, this council did do some consideration of lighting. Ryan, you've provided that feedback. We landed on, maybe let's just kind of update where we are in the lighting conversation. 'cause I
City
know we had-
Council decided to move forward with 22 lights, plus the 2 Cobras at the PED crossing. Those costs are incorporated in the cost agreement that we have.
Excellent.
And All our city's local share will be financed with our construction state aid, other than the sewer, sanitary sewer, water main, and pond cleaning work will be done from our enterprise funds.
Very good. Those were the top items I had on my list as I looked through the packet materials. Are there any other open questions from council? Happy to entertain. All right. If you're listening from the community, also note and be watching for that, final open house on the project, another opportunity to provide some feedback and certainly learn more about what's planned for staging. All right. Anything else for us?
Oh, thank you, Mayor, member of the council. If there's any other questions, let Ryan know, and we're happy to assist in however we can.
Let Ryan know.
Well, Ryan Goodman now.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here as well. All right. Tonight is street night, so we will move on to our next agenda item, which is consideration of our local street paving projects or different street projects. And I believe, Kevin, you are kicking us off, is that right?
Actually, Patrick's going to kick us off first, and then I'll finish it up with
kick
some of
off.
the numbers.
Kevin can give you all the bad.
Change your screen to slide.
Change the screen. Sorry about that. Okay, thanks. Just to remind the council, last year we came before the council with the 10-year plan. That 10-year plan had some assumptions, some estimates in there that we thought we were pretty good. And since we have a new council, plus we have issues with the streets, now we're going to focus in on the street portion of that 10-year plan. Both Ryan, Dave, Kevin, and I have been working towards what we can do. We know the streets are a large challenge, probably the largest challenge we have. So tonight we're going to go with the two scenarios for you. And Kevin's going to go through those and to show you what we think, you know, what we have to do to get the streets paved. It's an aggressive, it's 10-year schedule, but it still might be a little shocking to some. Just to give you some background, again, Forest Lake has 130 miles of roads. We have 105 miles that are paved. This is maybe a little bit an older number, but 55.4% of the roads are probably at a 6 or below, probably worse now than they were before the beginning of last winter.
6 out of how many? 6 out of, what's the scale? Just what's the scale?
55% are 6 or below, rated
And-
6 out of 10, I'm sorry. On a scale of 1 to 10, 55% are below half, really, which is not great. We would like to have them all at minimum score of 5 on a scale of 10, minimum. I mean, that, we have some that are really at 1 or 0, and we have some recent ones that are 9 or 10. So, but right now, we're not doing, keeping up like we should. It's underfunded. We've traditionally here have not funded streets in a decent manner or a responsible manner, actually. Infrastructure concerns were part of the strategic plan. The community identified infrastructure as a large portion of what they believe is necessary for the community to continue to grow and to be the community that they envision. Again, as I mentioned, we presented a preliminary 10-year plan to look at the challenges of paving. And we've offered 3 or 4 different times additional information regarding paving and lack of funding. It seems every budget cycle we've gone through this, so. Funding, Property tax is one of the ways we fund roads here. Prior to 2020, we didn't fund any roads through property tax. It was zero, which is an unusual, be quite honest, way to not fund roads. In the
Can we
2020.
pause- that's such an important point. Can we pause there? So historically, prior to 2020, roads were not funded through property tax. And is that both initial build as well as maintenance? Like,
Yes.
we didn't, okay.
Yes.
I think that's, okay.
It's an unusual, I haven't seen many communities that don't use property tax to fund road construction. You do it in two different ways, one with a levy that goes to the construction fund, or two with debt service that would go to the debt service fund. Really, we use debt once in a while, but no consistent manner where we're funding roads through property taxes. Beginning with the 2020 budget, we introduced a $50,000 tax levy and have now gotten that up to, in the 2023 budget, up to $200,000 going into the paving fund, or capital improvement fund, as we call it.
And for context, so we started with recognizing something, it needs to be something north of zero. So 2020, we started with 50,000. We're now up to 200,000 per year. Just on average, if we're not, what is our typical average spend per year? I know that it's variable, but I'm just trying to illustrate some of what the deficit has been.
The goal for property tax supported maintenance of streets should be $1 million a year.
And actually,
Probably more at this point.
we'll get into some of what that expense is. I'm just trying to, or some of what the projected expense is going to be. I'm just trying to
And we'll
paint
get
kind of what our
Kevin will get
deficit is,
into
yeah.
that. He's got it all laid out. You'll see what we are projecting with our expenses for maintenance, construction, and things like that. The city does have a franchise fees on electric, gas, and so forth, which is budgeted at $770,000 that goes to the capital fund. We receive about $900,000 in state aid in fiscal year 2023. We received $335,000 in 2023 for state aid maintenance, and that's not repaving street, that's seal coating, that's crack filling, that's just minor, road maintenance. It's not major repairs or major reconstruction. And then back in 2019, when we were doing some refinancing with this building and others, we included $4 million for a bond issue for roads. We were able to do that with some of the financial differences that we did when we refinanced the bond. It was a good time to do it. It made sense, and the rates were extremely low at the time. So the expenditure categories, as I kind of mentioned earlier, where we got the funds, but we have state maintenance aid, which is, like I said, maintenance projects, which are seal coating, crack filling, small maintenance. We have local street maintenance projects, which basically is the mill and overlay or the resurfacing. Just, you've seen it all, scrape the top off and repave it. That's pretty much, if that's what you can envision. We spend money on state aid cooperative agreements, such as the county tonight. We use our state aid funds. That's a major portion of where our state aid has been going. Instead of it's going to the local run, it's been going to these shared funds, and you'll see that coming up. And then we also have major reconstruction projects. And again, we talked about that today when Eureka Avenue came up. That's not a mill and overlay, that's not a minor one. That's dig down to the bottom, dig all the stone out, and fix it entirely. So those are the expensive ones. Those also include looking at the water, sewer, and stormwater on those roads as well. All of it's a comprehensive rebuilding of a road. Here's what we expect to spend this year. We have property tax of $200,000, as we mentioned before. We have franchise fees of $770,000. I mentioned the municipal state aid and the state maintenance aid. Both of those are not going to be used for any road reconstruction. Again, maintenance is going towards maintenance, but the municipal state aid is going to different projects that we have to match. Again, we're not going to use any state aid through the year 2027. It's all dedicated for matched projects. That's County Road 32, 33, 97. We've done that in the past with the roundabouts on 97. So immediately we've taken that off the books. So if we do nothing else for the next 10 years, or at least through 2027, we'll be only basically spending close to only $1 million on roads, which is, while that seems a lot in everybody's mind, $1 million, it's not. It gives maybe about a mile of a road, and that's about it. Again, what's the cost? This is just road maintenance, the maintenance part, that's the mill and overlay, it's not the reconstruction, but if you look at that, if it has a curb or doesn't have a curb, you know, about a per mile cost, and these figures may be a little outdated since I last did this slide, but $528,000 for a street to mill and overlay and minor reconstruction there. Or with it, if it has a curve, $792,000. So you see how much it costs for a simple mill and overlay kind of project. And again, you can only imagine what a North Shore Trail, a Eureka Avenue, all those are gonna cost, and we'll see those soon. So why do we want to increase spending? Well, residents like the roads. They like their roads good. They don't want to go through potholes. That's the major issue. For every dollar we spend on maintenance, which is making the roads well, we'll save about $7 in road repair. I mean, if we maintain them, if we mill and overlay, we save money in the long run on maintenance. And that prolongs the life cycle of any road. I mean, if you take care of them, if you mill and overlay them every 20 years or whatever the schedule is. And finally, the roads just, as this winter has proved more and more, they just continue to deteriorate and fail. The roads aren't getting any better. We're not touching them, they're not getting any better. And we have to stop kicking the can down the road. We've done it here for so long. We've gotten into a situation where we have to play catch up, and what you'll see tonight is our suggested method of how to do that. So our solutions are continuing in the same path, basically do nothing, except leave it the way it is. And that's always a possibility, or increase funding. And we can increase funding by increasing the levy. We can issue bonds for major reconstruction projects. We can issue bonds also for a minor repair, mill and overlay. We can make a combination of levy and bonding. We can consider a sales tax. That's a 3-year process. There's no guarantee that that will get A, through the legislature, and B, through a referendum. Plus, you have to identify the projects that you're going to do for a sales tax. Not that I'm not suggesting, but it's more difficult. And special assessment. Special assessment's also a difficult process. You have to have majority of people wanting to special assess, agree to special assess their roads. And recently, there's been court cases that you have to prove that the repaving of the road or the improvement of the road adds to the value of the property. And that's, in this case, if we're just mill and overlaying, it's not going to add value to anybody's property. It's really a very difficult test to prove that part of it, but also to get all the neighbors, at least 51% of the neighbors or whatever the thing is, to agree to assess their properties. We have 2 proposed options tonight. They're very similar, but both proposals will include an increase in the tax levy and sizable GO bond issues in the next 10 years. With that, I will disconnect, and Kevin will give you all the great news that we have for him. But I think what Kevin's going to show you is a pretty solid plan, and actually pretty doable.
Can we look at those cute kids a little bit more before we see this? Because I don't think it's going to be quite as cute.
Madam Mayor, may I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
You mentioned that you think that $1 million is the ideal for the property tax levy. Is that based on the miles of roads or city size?
I'm sorry, one more time?
I think you mentioned something to the effect that $1 million a year would be ideal from property tax versus a 200 or the 50.
That takes into consideration mostly the mill and overlay portion of the roads, not the major reconstruction. We can easily do, and probably should be doing, $1 million in maintenance, which I call mill and overlay on an annual basis.
And that, again, is that just based on our number of miles of road, or where is that? Or is that?
It's based on a lot of the estimates from Dave and Ryan on the shape of our roads, how many miles of roads we have, and when we can do them. And again, we also can only do so many a year. We can't, I mean, if you gave me $10 million and say, spend it next year, we just couldn't do it. So that's kind of, it takes into consideration miles of road, the ratings of the road, and how much we can actually get done.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, Mayor and members of the council, I printed off this information for you as well. There's 7 pages in the packet, but I also have it up on screen. I'll be flipping back and forth between some pages, so I'll try my best just to kind of keep you updated with where we're at. So like Patrick said, we're going to present 2 scenarios here for what we're looking at. So we're going to be starting with what I call scenario 1, and I'll get into the details of that now. So it's important when we're looking at these plans, not only to identify the expenditure we need, but also how we're gonna fund those type of improvements, repairs and maintenance, or reconstruction costs. So if you flip to page 2, or I'm gonna go to page 2 on my screen as well. This to start out with the state aid maintenance funding. We have it broken down by year, where you see that there's a $335,000 budget in there for that state aid maintenance. And on the revenue side, back on page 1, there's a $335,000 revenue side identified for that. So it's gonna fluctuate depending on what the state's doing for those maintenance aid funded. So there is some, if we need to do more maintenance and they cut that funding, there is some opportunity there where there'd be lack of funding to meet up with the funds that the city needs. But at this point, we're just calling those equal, as there's no,
Are those
no reason to see
are
it the
those
other way.
state aid dollars set annually, and do they vary annually, or what's the predictability of that? I don't know if state aid is ever predictable, but
Ryan
generally.
can answer those questions a little bit better than I can.
Mayor, City Council, large portion of state aid dollars, whether it's construction or the maintenance, are funded by your gas tax. So think about what the gas tax has been doing the last couple of years. People are starting to bike more. People are driving electric cars, right? So our revenue has continually gone down, which is almost proportional to what our money from the state has come in. You know, we were up here several years ago, and we've been coming down every year. So until some of that might change, or you add a wheelage tax or tabs, you know, increase there, that revenue is not gonna go back up until we look at a different mechanism of collecting revenue. And just put it in perspective, how we get to construction and maintenance, right? So we allocate 25% of our funding and don't go over that, because if we go over that, then we have to really get very technical and get audited in how we spend that $335,000. And a lot more paperwork for public works, documentation. So that's why we allocate the 25%, and then the 335, that comes out of the 25% of your total state aid funds, goes into maintenance pots. And that gets dispersed to the city twice a year, typically January and July. And then the construction allotment gets dispersed in January. And you can only use the construction dollars after a project's been awarded. Okay, so let's just say if the county road project we just talked about doesn't get awarded, never moves forward, we can't then use our state aid money to pay for any of that stuff that's been incurred to date on that, but it could go to another project that gets awarded. And you only can get that money back through reimbursement requests. So you actually have to make contractors requests for payments and stuff like that. But on the maintenance side of thing, it's more than just the seal coating and crack filling. So of that $335,000 this year's project, for the seal coat project, only $200,000 has been budgeted towards that project, because that other money that's needed for maintenance goes to all the street patching Dave is doing, all the graveling. So all those other miscellaneous things Public Works needs to do on streets, that's coming out of that $335,000. So you imagine when we talked about it was gonna cost $10,000 to $15,000 just to go patch that one road we decided to add to the project. Just think how that then chews up the rest of the ability to fund other, just patching through the city, especially after the one we just had. So hopefully that's some very technical information you absorbed very well. If not, I'll repeat it again if I need to.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. So to continue, I'll just jump down midway on page 2 to state aid cooperative agreement projects. These are what we touched base on previously, where you have 33, 97, and 32. These are where we're dedicating those state aid dollars to those projects. So again, you will see that those expenditures line up with the revenue, so those are net neutral. Where we're talking about lack of funding is in the local maintenance street projects area, and then also the reconstruction projects on page 2. So currently in 2023, we have a budget of just about $1.1 million. That's funded through the $200,000 tax levy. We have our franchise fees, and then also have some small minor contributions from the enterprise funds to help pay for those projects. With working with Ryan and Dave and looking at the next 5 years to 10 years, as you can see, starting in 2024, that's our local maintenance projects, looking at just under 1.8 million. So when referencing back to the first page, that leaves a gap currently of 750,000 that we are unfunded currently. We don't have a funding source identified for how we would pay for that 1.8 million in maintenance projects. So in this scenario, the city is laying out that to make up that difference, we have a one-time levy increase in 2024 of 750,000 to meet that gap. And then you can see going forward into 2027, it bumps up by 50,000 just to keep up with increase in the streets that need to get done, and also increase in potential costs that could be out there as well.
Make sure you understand, that is a anticipated one-time bump to the capital improvement fund funded through the levy. Is that-
Correct.
and
So
then-
so currently there's a $200,000 levy. What we would propose in 2024 with this scenario would be a $950,000 levy, with the projection that it would not then increase until 2027.
Yep, so I probably actually said that wrong, because I said one-time bump. It's actually, yes, it's a one-time bump, but it's recurring in that becomes the new normal going forward.
Correct.
Okay. Does that make sense? I think that's an important point, because it's a one-time bump, but it's recurring. We're not bringing that back down. That does become the new normal. Back to Patrick's original comment on if we believe, it's needing closer to be $1 million a year, that one-time bump does get us to 950,000 a year. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, so the total levy would be 950,000, and then you would have 770,000 roughly through franchise fees, and then a low of contribution from the enterprise funds and the storm fund to get you up to just that 1.8 million. So this scenario is laying out that there would be no bonds issued, no debt issued for this local street maintenance portion of projects.
So this scenario, I'm gonna just repeat what you said, make sure I understand. So this scenario would have no additional bonding for that portion. It's funded through the general fund levy.
Correct. Those maintenance, mill and overlay type of streets.
Yep.
That's where this money's going to go. It does not take into consideration the major reconstruction projects that we're going to talk about shortly.
Go ahead.
And so what is the impact on a
We'll get there.
typical, okay.
We'll get there. I don't know if I'll give you per house, but we'll show you what the levy does. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right, so then the last portion of this fund is your reconstruction project. So that's on the bottom part of page 2, where we're looking at, these are your full reconstruction projects. These are rip up the whole road, there's storm elements, there's water and sewer elements. It's important to note that these numbers are just the street and storm portions of this project. This does not include the water's contribution or sewer's contribution as well. This is a portion that would be funded through issuing debt and paid through a property tax. The enterprise fund, so if there's for example, this project has $1 million water portion, that portion of any debt issue would get paid through the water enterprise funds and not have an impact on the levy.
And just so you all know, before we go into a major reconstruction, we look at the sewer underneath the road, we look at the water underneath the road. If there's storm water, sometimes there's not, we'll look at that as well. So we know we don't want to fix a road and have pipes breaking all over. So we televise and look at those other structures. That's why we have to include monies from those utility funds to support those.
If reconstruction means either upgraded or new pedestrian facilities, I know these numbers are very preliminary, but are those types of improvements also included into the projection? We've got
I believe we did put pedestrians.
And again, I know that these are really high level for modeling purposes.
For the reconstruction project, there are pedestrian improvements accounted for in the costs that are shown in the charts tonight.
Okay.
On the local projects, with the maintenance projects, there is no proposed new improvements, but it would replace any existing pedestrian improvements we have to bring them up to ADA compliance, ped ramps, slope of sidewalks, crack sidewalks or heave sidewalks, stuff like that, for sure.
I think that's important maybe to point out, because as we're just looking at reconstruction projects and what's on the needs list versus what's on the wants list, and how does this all fit together? We've talked about a lot of, wouldn't it be nice to have some nice trail facilities on some of these major reconstruction projects? North Shore Trail comes to mind. I know we've got a lot of Clear Lake folks in the audience tonight. Eureka Avenue is on that list, and we've talked about, it'd be nice to have some trail facilities. These numbers, if I'm understanding Ryan, are just purely the reconstruction with pedestrian facilities as they exist today. Is that right?
On the bottom of the screen where you see reconstruction projects,
Yeah.
those are reconstructed. So those would be brand-new facilities. Other than the third project down in second one down, 2025, that does not include any pedestrian improvements.
Okay.
But the Eureka Avenue does put in new pedestrian improvements.
It has the costs associated to do the improvements. If it can actually fit to what we've estimated, that's what's not known until a wetland delineation and survey are completed.
Yeah, I think that's the
So maybe
balance I'm trying to find is we're trying to be inclusive of the cost, but certainly each one of these projects is gonna require a lot of additional consideration, so, okay. I know the purpose tonight is more at the portfolio level. It's really easy to get sucked into the individual project detail, but, okay. Council, how are we doing? Any other questions to this point? Are we hanging with, all right. Go
All
ahead,
right, so
Ryan.
this, I guess, wrap up the reconstruction projects portion. So as you can see there, there's some quite significant dollars tied up in the next 5-6 years that for these reconstruction. These are where debt will be issued. Those are planned projects that the city staff feels need to get done and in that time frame. So when you go back to page 1 on the scenario, you can see that all those bonds with reconstruction, those is revenue associated, the expense and revenue match. So whatever the expense is on the reconstruction side is what we're issuing in bonds to help fund those projects. So with that, with all this talk about issuing the tax levy for bumping it up to 750,000 and then also issuing some debt in the future, this lays out those impacts on the increase in the tax levy out till 2032. So on the capital improvement line, the third one down, you can see that the current levy is 200,000, and then there's a bump up to 950,000 in 2024, and then that is maintained at 950,000 through the duration, and then has that $50,000 increase in 2027. Also down below, there's this proposed bond issuances. That is those reconstruction projects as outlined previously. These are projected out to be paid over 20 years, which is pretty typical for a street reconstruction bond. The last thing you want to do is go out any farther, knowing that if you went out to 30 years and you reconstruct this road and in 20 years you're having to do it again, but the old debt is not paid off. So 20 years is a pretty standard amount for these projects. For these street reconstructions is estimating an interest rate of 3.5%. That again can fluctuate with that, with how that looks. Talking with Ellers and out there, that seems to be pretty reasonable. But again, these are just projections. It could be higher, it could be lower. And when I scheduled out this debt, it's keeping that principal payment level throughout the 20 years. You can structure these where you might front load and pay more principal in the front end, or back load and pay more principal as you get closer to maturity. for projections of the analysis, just tried to keep that levy for these proposed issuances relatively flat, with the change being decreasing interest as you go on. So there's different ways to structure it, and as we get, would be, if we go ahead and issue debt for any of these projects, would be working with Ellers and given the current market fluctuations, how to best set those up.
And we do recommend keeping that debt service as level as possible, because what you don't want to do is have it up this year, down the next year, up this year, because then it looks like your levy's going up when it's really not. Keep it level. It makes it easier for everybody to understand, and it doesn't give misinterpretations of what you're doing with the levy.
So is the bond repayment built into here?
This is the bond repayment in here, yes. If you see the proposed bond issues, that's what you're starting to see is the debt service for the bond payment. You're on the tax levy projections. You're seeing the levies, as you start to see 2024, you start to see dollars come in, and those are the debt service payments on the bonds.
The one thing also built into this schedule, I know we're talking about streets, but there is a proposed bond issuance for a public works facility in 2026. As you will see in that proposed bond issuances too, as we have that out there in our identified in our 10-year plan. So that bond projection is factored into this as well. So you can get a clear picture on everything that would be out there. I guess right now I just want to stop if there's any specific questions on this scenario. Otherwise, I'll go into scenario proposal number 2 for how this could be structured differently, and then try to tie it in together for what the staff is recommending.
I think just maybe something to highlight. When we're looking at the levy impact of scenario 1, we are talking about, that's not a levy number at the bottom, that's an increase year over year. And so this would have a proposed significant increase in 2024 of 16.57%. But because it's, again, those are recurring every year, and because of the additional need, there is, considerable increases. It's not like we're going to do a one-time bump and then level off and be back to 2% increases. They're sizable numbers, but also I think this just illustrates the magnitude of the problem we have with our streets and what is the ongoing, there's a question of what are we doing to catch up, and then what are we doing to to get to a new funding level that is sustainable long-term. And I really appreciate staff's efforts to paint this picture, because as challenging as it is to look at, I think these are some of the questions council needs to tackle here coming up, so. Other questions specific to scenario 1? All right, with that basis, maybe let's flip the
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
page to
just one.
scenario 2.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
franchise fees, that's coming from utilities, right?
Yes, electric, gas.
So, we have some projected growth. Is it reasonable to build in an increase to those from?
We could build in, it wouldn't be significant growth. It just isn't that much on a year-to-year basis. We can look at what the trends are, but I think, you're talking 10,000 or something, maybe.
Okay, so if you flip the page, or I'll flip it on my screen as well, I won't go over all the detail. All the details are the same with this part of the presentation, scenario 2, as I call it, except for on page 4, this unfunded street maintenance projects. So what happened here is, instead of doing a $750,000 bump in 1 year and then keeping it right at that, is with the goal to get it up to that $1 million level in 2027 with relatively the same increase. So in 2024, it would be proposed to increase that levy $350,000, and then $150,000 in 2026, and 2027, to get up to that $1 million funded. So we would be paying with current balances for those local street maintenance projects going forward from there on. The difference to still fund those was then rolled into the proposed bond issuances. So then about halfway down, there's bonds that cover unfunded street maintenance projects. You can see would be proposing to issue about $750,000 in additional bonds to help cover that unfunded status of those local street maintenance funds until we get that levy up to that $1 million range. Any questions on what I just went over there before I go into what the impact of the levy is on that?
So scenario 2 delays the levy increases and bonds more upfront.
Correct.
But and the time frame is baking that in over a 3-year, 4-year period? 4 years?
4 years, correct.
Okay. And the impact of doing that on the levy saves a few percentage points in year 1, is that right?
Yeah, so going back, so then as you go on, it's on page 6, your tax levy projection scenario 2. This is what the impact is on if you went that route. As far as this, having those increases in the levy over the 4 years and adding some bond issuances. So this capital improvement fund, you can see here, is not, it's 550,000 and increased 150,000 each year until you reach that $1 million level. If you flip back to the previous tax levy projection, you're gonna see that these debt service payments increase because now you're issuing more debt to fund those projects with that. So you are correct. If you're looking at just at 2024, there is a lower impact on the levy in year 2024. But kind of to talk about both, I'm just going to jump to the last one where I laid out the comparison, where you're looking at not only percentage, but you're looking at dollars. So looking at it, I'll start with the percentages. So down below, you can see scenario 1 in 2024, about a 16.5% increase, scenario 2, 13.8. So the difference is scenario 1 having about 2.7% increase higher than scenario 2. However, when you look at 25, 26, and 27, scenario 1's percent increase is less than scenarios 2 because you're not only paying $750,000 in principal for debt, now you're paying interest on that debt that's being issued over the years at 3.5%, whatever that percent is. So you're actually spending more money by issuing more debt because now you're paying interest on that portion for taking out debt instead of having that increase in tax levy. So by the time you come to 2027, if you look at scenario 1 or scenario 2, it's going to pretty much equal out percentage increase basis. It's just that it evens it out. You could say a little bit more in scenario 2, but at the end, in 4 years following this schedule, you're going to be relatively the same. And you can see that when you look at the total dollars up in 2027. When you look at the total dollar amount of the levy and take your focus off the percentage increase by year, you're ending up pretty close to the same dollar amount. And actually, when you look at scenario 1 compared to scenario 2, your actual dollar amount of levy by having that $750,000 one bump increase is actually on a dollar per dollar basis lower than what it would be in scenario 2 if you issued debt. So when you look at it that way, staff is recommending to follow scenario 1 to have that one-time increase in 2024. Well, I shouldn't say one-time, increase it $750,000 and maintain that level in that fund. Because looking at the numbers that way, at the end, when you look at it on a long-term basis, is going to save the city money in the long run by not having to issue debt for that additional local street maintenance projects. And it's also going to get, by supporting that, working and getting the roads up to the standard that the city wants to have roads drivable and fixed up the way they should be. if mayor council has any questions at this point, I know it's a lot to take in, a lot of numbers. If there's anything I can help answer as far as what we went over, I'd be happy to answer those.
Start with maybe any questions about the model, the numbers, recommendations?
I have more questions
Yeah,
about other
please.
options, but we can,
Yeah.
if anyone has something on this.
I have also some questions about other options as well. So maybe let's just more broadly open it up. Go ahead.
So on the decision to use state aid for these projects that we're working with the state and the county, is that typical of what most cities tend to do in this scenario? Do they use those state aid funds to pool the money for these larger 32, 33, 97?
I think every city across the metro is going to be different depending on what pots of money they have budgeted for projects. In other cities that I work in as a consultant or in a pool, or we got a project, it is very common for that city to use state aid money. And the reason you use state aid money on these projects is because they're actually state aid eligible. Only 26.2 miles of your entire network are state aid eligible roads. I can't go use state aid funds on a non-state aid road. So
What's that percentage again of roads that are?
26.2 miles are designated as state aid routes in the city.
10%.
So like, example, other than the major ones we've talked about, what are some other?
Harrow Avenue, Goodview, North Shore. Eureka is not a state aid road. Fenway. And then you get out into some of the other areas where you picked which roads generate the highest traffic volumes, or the past city needed funds to do those roads. But other caveats to those state aid funds, roads, they have to connect to another state aid, a county road or a state highway. So it can't just be a local road, connect into a local road. It's got to have a approved segment, and we have that all mapped out, and we go through that approval every year, so.
So then the other question is on using sales tax to fund some of this. How common is that for cities? I know some of the larger cities do. And the only reason I bring that up is that the idea there is shifting some of that state aid money to more local roads, whichever is eligible, and take the burden off if we did decide to do a sales tax, which I know is challenging and not really a huge fan of it myself, but you know, we're such a regional hub that there are so many people that aren't residents of Forest Lake using those main roads. Why should the residents have to be providing those roads for people who are coming from out this community and take that tax burden off the local residents?
In my review of, every year I read what bills are introduced at this time of year for all other communities, and there are many that are asking sales tax for roads. When you do a state sales tax, you have to identify the project that those tax monies are going to go for. So we would create a project list, whether it's making the whole city a street district or what, I don't know the full mechanics of it, but we would have to make streets the project. Then, as you know, we have to get, the council has to approve a resolution. It has to go to the legislature for them to approve a bill that allows us to have a state sales tax, and then you have a referendum of the community. Your point is true that we have a lot of people who do come from outside. Based on the last study we did, we believe that a sales tax would generate, again, it's an estimate of $1.6 million. 40% of that would come from outside residents. So approximately 40. I mean, the numbers will change as we go along, but it's a long process. It won't get us to where we want to do quickly, and you always have the risk of that you will not be able to pass a referendum. Yeah, so that there's the inherent pitfalls there. You know, we could go down that route, but if that's, the council does that, I would try to plug some money back into roads from the levy. I mean, we just can't continue to do this. We need some kind of a solution. So if you go, you know, state sales tax in 3 years, if you can get it, we should still talk about raising the levy and raising the dollars that are going towards paving.
I struggle with the question of sales tax, and certainly, we're not alone in many cities have this challenge of funding street infrastructure, and it's why there are so many bills at the state right now to introduce additional state sales tax. Two things immediately come to mind as far as Forest, actually, three things come to mind when I think about this impact on Forest Lake. One, from a pragmatic standpoint, additional sources of revenue coming through specific voter approval has been challenging in this community, and I just think about the challenge of getting school referendums and school levies passed. Those have been decades-long projects to get the level of information out there, to get the support, to get those approved. And I think we could, if we are embarking on that, I think it's probably not a 3-year project. It's probably closer to a 5 to 7 year project to do that. We could do it. It's just, I want us to be realistic on what the time frame looks like, because there's just really a lot of community education that's needed. I think a lot of people think, I pay property taxes, fix my streets. And the challenge is, up until very recently, that's not what we were using that money for. And I just think there's a big disconnect. So I think I personally am challenged with us putting too many eggs in that basket. And then also along, just philosophically on the topic of, using, sales tax to fund this. That's one of the reasons I like about a property tax is I think it's a fair way of those who have an ability to paying more. Sales tax is a little bit more universal, and everybody who shops at Target and everyone who shops at Cub is impacted the exact same way under a sales tax scenario, and you don't get that automatic lift of those who can pay more, do pay more, that we get, philosophically we have that difference with property tax structure. And also I think that this is something that this community's just missed for many, many years, and we need to get it right. And so for saying, gosh, we've missed it, now let's look for another pool of revenue to fix it, I'm not sure that's the right approach either. I mean, these are our local streets. It's the streets in front of every one of our homes. I think we need a mechanism to fund it. It's a challenge. It's not easy to think about, making a large levy increase. But I also think it's part of just long-term what we need to do as a city. And so I think rather than trying to find another source of revenue that's recurring like a property tax, we have a mechanism to fix this. As painful as it is, I'm not sure finding a different mechanism is any less painful, even though it may seem like a sexy option at the time, because again, nobody loves property tax increases. But I'm open to continuing that conversation, and certainly am not decided, but I think we have immediate need on some streets, and I think we just need to make some immediate action. But Ryan, go ahead.
Mayor, City Council, you hit it exactly on the nail of something I wanted to expand off of what you just said. You said it missed for many years, right? So let's put that in perspective. 2021, our budget for our local maintenance projects and seal coating and crack filling was $1,020,000. And this year, currently, our projects are budgeted at $1,170,000. Rewind back to February 2012 when the City Council received the pavement management plan that was prepared off of 2011 construction estimates. It was recommended at that time those same exact projects were to be funded at $1,020,000 a year. That was based on $60 per ton. Our lowest bid in our 2023 bids was 60% higher than that.
Yeah.
That was 11 years ago. They were told where to fund these projects. So put that in perspective.
Just a follow-up question. I think I know the answer to this, but just want to confirm it. So there was no monies being received from the property taxes to fund road projects. So I mean, what was the budget for that road maintenance from 2012 to 21 or whatever it was?
We can get to that. I mean, it mostly came from franchise fee and state shared, if I recall.
Franchise fees and state aid.
That's it, state aid and franchise fees. So, at the most 700,000 and whatever the maintenance, the state aid was.
Councilmember Roberts does make a good point, though, on we have both the curse and the benefit of having a lot of municipalities impacting some of our, or a lot of other jurisdictions impacting our major thoroughfares. Most of our major thoroughfares are county or state, which is, again, it's both a curse and a blessing. It's great that we have that partnership. And, you know, if we were to do a property tax, or I'm sorry, a sales tax, and if that were to allow for some of those dollars to be reallocated, there is some potential upside there, but I'm still not sure it gets us, we're just so fundamentally upside down on funding mechanism that I'm not sure it gets us
And
all of the way
Just for the
there.
record, we kind of jumped over that.
Yeah.
And just wanted to talk that back. You know, that would not be a real favorable option for me, but just to have that conversation.
No, I think that's something we need to think about, because the question comes down to, you know, at some point, and, you know, when the county is considered using a sales tax for funding of streets, part of the, you know, argument is those who use it should pay for it. And many of those streets on county roads are to support commerce and to support those who are shopping and all of, you know, there is an alignment there that we should also consider. I'm just not sure when it gets back to kind of righting the ship, how much of that we can rely on a new revenue source coming in to solve the challenge.
So on a 16% increase in what typically, historically, the increase has been just on the general levy, what does that look, is that like a 30-some% increase on tax? Or am I off there? Like, we've been going up, I guess it shouldn't be that high, but we've been going up, what, typically 2-3%?
We've been, the
General.
last 3 years, we've gone up between 5 and 8%, I believe.
Okay, so then you'd put the 16 on top of that, just to try to get, again, that first
Right.
question, the impact on a,
Yeah, we'll have to do that calculation. We can easily do that on what the impact is on the taxpayer's bill. And what we're also gonna do is we're gonna look at, last year, it was interesting to see our neighboring municipalities go, their tax bills. And a lot of them went into the teens, to the mid-teens. And we stayed at the 5 whatever percent. So historically,
than
we've also
inflation.
been pretty low on increasing our tax. I mean, the story here has been keep the tax bill as low as possible. And while you've been very successful doing that, you're paying the price on a lot of different areas of the city. You're paying the price in roads, you're paying the price in parks, you're paying the price in buildings. That's what you're doing.
Well, if I'm reading Kevin's projection right, though, on that last page of scenario 1, that 16.57 is kind of the projected, right, based on the tax.
Yeah,
It's not
we've-
that
we've-
plus another 7 per se.
I'm sorry?
It's not that plus another 7 per se.
No.
No, it's
No,
not.
and that also includes some assumptions about the general fund is in there, so we've raised that about 5%. So it's not only just the capital improvement fund, it's the other funds and how we project those. It doesn't project an increase for parks on the levy, it doesn't project an increase for the EDA on the levy. It does the capital improvement fund, we have a projection to increase the capital equipment replacement, we have an increase on the general fund, and we have obviously an increase in the debt service because we're going to issue debt.
Councilmember Erickson, I think you hit it there. This is projected. So when we come with our 2024 budget to tie this back and see 16.57%, if this is the route we're going, that is not going to be that number because there are other projections built in there. But this is a good starting point just for that. We have an increase built in the general fund plus some other assumptions and things that we're getting into as we go through our budgeting process that's in there. So just want to make sure that you're aware that it is just projected at this
And not to get us off streets right now, but I want to mention the Maze workshop that's coming up. We now have a capital plan for the parks that we developed from the study, so we will be bringing that back into you. And if you recall, the city hired a consultant to look at the buildings that we have, particularly the senior center, this building, the ambulance bay, and we'll have results from those. None of those are going to be great news, to be quite honest with you. So that will also impact what we're going to recommend. These are the hard, I mean, I hate to say it, but we have to start to make these decisions, whether they're good or bad or indifferent. We've been leaving all of these things way too long. Again, we've got a deck on the senior center that has been closed because it's dangerous. We've got an ambulance building and parking lot that looks like it's a gravel parking lot. So there's things that we need to address, particularly this building before. It's a 5-6-year-old building. We don't want to wait 20 years to start doing things to fix this building, or at least maintain this building. So they cost you. So in the May workshop, we will be going down that road too. And then this doesn't even take into consideration any of the expenses that we talk about for the downtown plan. So, I mean, I sound like the Grim Reaper, but that's the Grim Reaper. I mean, we've got to do this. Sooner or later, we've got to do this. We've tried, we took the first 3 years or so to come up with this 10-year financial plan. We're finally at the point where it's really pretty solid. The nice thing about this plan is when we do go out for debt service and we show these to the rating agencies, they'll love this. This is what they want. This is what they look for. But we've got more news at the May workshop.
I think that's maybe a good, just opportunity to make the observation of how did we get to this spot, right? And beyond keeping property taxes low, which we've been really good at, we haven't had this 10-year model that, so historically, over the years, as from my observation, it seems that decisions were made very siloed. Here is going to be the budget for a year
Yes.
for parks, or here is going to be the street budget for the year coming up. Here's what the levy's going to look like next year. What I don't think we have had, or clearly I hadn't seen articulated, is pull all of that together and what are all of the competing needs and how do all of those things work together? Because at the end of the day, the the taxpayers, our residents, don't really care. They see a set of services and they see a bill, and how is that all going to work together? And that was I think the financial model, the family budget, if you will, that we had missed. And so now at least as painful as it is to see some of these projections come in, we at least can see here are the projected sources of revenue, here are all of the projected expenses, here are some different options to be able to pay for those things, so that when we're talking about parks, we can have streets in mind, and when we're talking about streets, we can have parks and downtown in mind. Because again, I think historically, we've made those individual decisions very siloed, which just means that you lose the perspective of long-term, where is this going? And I appreciate the work in getting us to this point, because it's been a couple of years of pulling it all together, getting the estimates of the projects in place. And at least now, as painful as it is, again, to see on paper what the projections are, we can at least make some choices and have some conversation with the community about what do they value, and just make sure that we're prioritizing the right things. So, for tonight's workshop, is good tee up for some of the discussion we're going to have in May on parks. I guess I would maybe say, Kevin, Patrick, what additional feedback points do you have of us, or maybe what haven't we covered?
I think you've covered it all. I think you know what's going on. We will put scenario one in the budget, what we present you in August or early August. We need to show you what that is. Depending on what what the May work session looks like, I don't know where we're going with that yet, but this will definitely be included when we recommend a budget to you for 24. Then it'll be up to the council before the end of September to determine where we're going on that.
Go ahead.
So similar to having open houses with large projects, such road projects, is there opportunity to have, like, after the May feedback and just to let the state of the city, that the public can see? So, these folks are fortunate enough to be able to hear this firsthand, but not many people are engaged like that. And so to try to engage them through social media or something, so when they see that number come, whenever that statement comes, and they're in here, like last week, they might be a year from now complaining about their taxes, like, just to educate them and try to let them know exactly where we're at.
Absolutely. There's a need to do that, whether it's an open house or whether it's a mailing or whatever it may be. We will discuss that internally to see what that's going to look like. But we will wait until after May to tell you what the parks issue are and what the building issues are. And then
Add-
come up with some kind of a plan there.
I think, so I really, I think that's a great idea, and I think, you know, historically, we have done workshop sessions, so that, you know, first, all meetings are public, everyone's welcome. I think in this, if we're a little ahead of showing some of these preliminary numbers, here we are mid-April, and we already have a draft. Many times, we aren't seeing anything around a preliminary number until deeper into August. So since we are a little ahead, and since we at least have some items sketched out, planning a couple of sessions, I think would be helpful, and maybe, it's a lot to consume, so maybe it's part one, part two, and maybe one night is focused on, I'm just making this up, but maybe one night's focused on streets in downtown, another night is focused specifically on parks, that's been an area of interest, just to gather some feedback that then helps to inform, it gives us some things to think about. And it'd be nice to have some time to react to that. You know, certainly we have to pass that preliminary levy by the end of September. If we could be, you know, deep into feedback by August, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, let's
Just-
give us a chance to take
It's-
talk about that, see what we can come up with.
It's certainly not going to be an ordinary course of business budget. And I also think from a public's perspective, peeling away the difference between what we're doing here with the levy, which is substantial, potentially substantial if we move forward, is very different than the conversation around property tax values, and just giving some time for that to get communicated, get understood, I think is also important, because although property tax values were very moderate in increases this year, certainly this community has that in mind, and
Sure.
want them to, you know, just provide some opportunity for awareness that those are two very different things.
And I'm guessing from the May discussion, these numbers will be updated afterwards?
These numbers won't be up. We will give you, I mean, the street's going to stay the same, the street numbers, but we will try to add in the park numbers, and we'll add in the, whatever the building numbers may say. I believe the park number is gonna be big, probably big.
With that said, we need some decision levers in the process, because ultimately, we're going to have to make some decisions, right? We're not gonna go from historically underfunded in parks and streets and buildings for decades to, hey, we're all caught up in 2 years.
I understand.
Right, and I know you're not expecting that, but,
Oh, I was.
it would, somehow we need a way to present those full plans, and then to have some more conversation with council around prioritization and
Absolutely.
sequencing. I expect there's going to be parts on the park plan that, I don't know, we might, it's hard to say what's more important, streets or parks, but ultimately, those are the decisions we'll have to make, and having a way of sequencing that, I think, is going to be just really
Yeah.
important. Otherwise, I get nervous that the decision's so big that we just climb up and decide it's not the year to move, and that's not the right answer either.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what the council has to do. It has to prioritize what it wants to do. Ask us to come back with, well, say we do this with streets, or say we do this with parks, just give us some ideas where you're going. When you do a capital improvement plan, basically, this is what the capital improvement plans are, you can, you shift around a little bit to get to where you want to go. Does this 10-year plan go to a 12-year plan? Do you want us to put it out another 2 years? What's the impact? Can, new swing sets at this park be put off for you? Probably not, but I mean, just kind of that, we have to make some of those decisions as well. But next month, you'll see $1 million to $1.5 million in parks, and I don't know what in buildings yet.
So before we go too far down the road on the park thing, I'd really like to see a full park board seated and appointed and in place to help us make these decisions. So I think that is key.
And I think we're very close to being ready to
Okay.
seat that new park board, and agree, very important.
Other questions, comments?
to those in the audience who've stuck with us, thank you. It's great to see your faces and great to have you help digest this information with us. That is.
Just
oh, go
one other
ahead, yeah.
question, and I know we're not supposed to get into the weeds of specific projects, but we've talked about Eureka, and hopefully we get some help with the state there. But on the North Shore, this looks like this might be a little bit of a sped-up project than what was proposed in the past, as far as the timing or maybe location of different project, of where this construction would start, and
Yeah, I don't know how much in the past it was, but this is meeting with Dave and Ryan and Kevin and I. This is what we believe the schedule, this is what we believe the road conditions are and what's priority. Priority at first, obviously, is Eureka. Because like the gentleman, if you drove down there today, like some of us did, and saw all the cars, it's a very dangerous road. It's terribly dangerous. So that's an important one. So hopefully we'll follow this schedule. You know, things change every year, so I can't promise you 100% it'll be that way, but that's what we see right now. And I'm really hoping that if the legislature can get a bonding bill, we can somehow get included and we can scrape $4 million off of our bonds, so. But this is what we believe the priority is at this point. Again, as we said last meeting, after the winter, it may change. Next winter, it may change. That's the way, that's how these roads are, and that's how bad a shape they can be.
Yeah. To your question, was there maybe a version of this, Ryan, a previous version that had Forest Road first and North Shore Trail maybe later on? Have those been swapped maybe?
Remember, you guys authorized and approved that temporary project, basically you call it, the microsurfacing that we did last summer on Forest Road to limp that,
Yeah.
basically a 10-year bandage we're hoping for
Right.
until County State Aid Highway 32 are done
Right.
and Highway 97 are done. So now that's why it's fallen and programmed at 2029 and 30.
Okay. That makes sense. Any other?
Was there a scenario previous that contemplated closing down Eureka and using a trail
I'll take credit for that one.
and trailhead in that, and maybe, I don't know what local residents feel, but, you know, from safety
We,
standpoint?
not last year, the year before, we mentioned, we knew Eureka's an issue. We know that it's a very dangerous road. We know that people walk down the road. We know they park their cars on the road. And what we thought was that if we closed the road, we could make a nice recreational area, put trails in, and put parking at each end so that it wouldn't be a far walk, and put piers or stabilize the shoreline. Social media and those people didn't particularly agree with me. It's still an option. I mean, it probably would be less than 4 million, I don't know for sure, but it's an option. It makes some sense because of how it's sandwiched between the lake and the highway, and how it's wet there, to make it a recreational part and but a lot of people, like the gentleman said earlier, use that to go through back and forth. So we can revisit that if the council wants to.
Yeah, I would say initial public reaction was not strong. It was not
I would
very
say not.
supportive, but. That said, it's a challenging footprint, and it's a small space
Very
where
challenging.
to accommodate recreation and the transit traffics, both of them safely, is challenging. And so, you know, are we asking too much of a very small space? I think we are. It's just going to be hard to.
You've got the road, you've got people who want to park, you've got people who want to fish, you've got shoreline erosion issues, and you've got the interstate highway issues and the drainage there. So it's tremendously challenging, and hopefully it stays around $4 million and doesn't continue to go up depending on what has to be done.
And at the time, I apologize for having to revisit this, but was Clear Lake Association involved? Was there feedback there? Because maybe that's a good place to reach out, because that does.
Feedback, yeah, Clear Lake is very interested in shoreline restoration and
So is the
being part of
watershed
that.
district.
Watershed district as well.
They weren't, I don't believe they were in favor of closing the road, but definitely, the DNR is going to have to be involved, Clear Lake should be involved. Columbus will probably have to be involved as well.
If I could, but please, go ahead.
Since the DNR owns that strip of land that's eroding, they have been supportive and encouraging to repair that. And Rice Creek Watershed District has committed to seeking funding for it, both from the watershed district and from grants, much as they did for the stormwater project at City Center when it was built. As far as residents' interest in having the road rebuilt, I think that's the majority of the Clear Lake members. It's also used, it's a very heavily used road in commuting time. So I don't know if there's room for everything that you'd like to put in there, but improving the road and fixing that shoreline are the key things. Fishing, maybe there's a pier that can come off. There's a public access right there. Maybe there's a fishing pier that can come off of that public access where there's already parking, rather than having people parking their cars on the road and opening their doors into the right of way.
I'd be more specific workshop topic for, as we continue to consider that area. All right, we are at the end of our planned agenda time. Any other topics, questions? Quick reminder on just logistics, we have another workshop scheduled, joint workshop with the EDA on Wednesday evening. Karen, I think we're also starting that at 6:30, is that correct?
It starts at 6:30, and then also don't forget, next Monday, the 24th, you will have, you will come back and revisit the, with local board of appeals. That will be at 6:30, just prior to the council meeting in here.
Very good. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.